Hi, do you want to learn how to beat your fear of the coronavirus? If you do, stick around until the end of the video. I'm interviewing Matt, and the two of us have had severe OCD and anxiety before it became popular, and we've had access to some of the best treatment in North America. We live with these fears and overcome them, and so we can teach you how, because we actually overcome these fears day by day, moment by moment, attack by attack. And I get that this is hard. I'm having a hard time right now. So is Matt. This is kind of a for us, by us channel and stream. Oh, cool. A viewer from Dubai. Hi. So normally overcoming fear like this, it feels terrible. So, if it feels bad, you're probably on the right track. So, as I said, this is going to be mostly about contamination, anxiety, how to overcome it, and it's pretty exciting. We're going to teach through three main stories. The story of the pink towels that got away, the contaminating cat, and the towel that was never cleaned, and the airplane trip that never happened, and how to fear disinfectant. So I'm just waiting for Matt to come on, and we'll see. It's his first time doing a joint Instagram stream, but that's mainly what we are going to cover. Actually, while we're waiting, go ahead and throw any questions in the chat, and as soon as Matt's here, I will have him jump on. But if you want a quick Cole's note, as I said, normally, if you're doing this right, it feels terrible. I moved to rural Spain recently, and I feel kind of overwhelmed a lot because I just speak enough Spanish to be able to get around and to work. But I often get these anxiety attack or panic attack moments. So, and we're also somewhat in the OCD apocalypse of contamination. So I think it's weird. I used to take hand sanitizer with me to class at law school, and now as for my job, I have to use hand sanitizer. So the tables have flipped completely. So it's really weird because, oh, thank you. Here we go. Let's see.
Remind me of that thought if I forget later. So Matt should be joining in the next couple of minutes. Oh, here we are.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going? You're live. Oh, I gotta adjust.
Yeah, good.
Great.
I'm a little anxious right now, so I think that's probably a good thing.
Well, actually, maybe we should address this first because we're not pretending. We're actually.
This is not pretend.
It's really funny. Well, we have some practice in this. It's just now this is public. So for people who don't know, like we had a private kind of video support group first, and then now this is our first public stream with the two of us at least.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's right.
Does it feel different knowing that you're on the front lines now?
A little bit. Yeah, it's cool though. I'm really happy to be able to do this and to share my experience.
Wonderful. Well, it's perfect timing, I think, because contamination externally is so strong now, the fears of it. I had a lot of contamination fears internally first before quarantine, pandemic fears, etc. So now it feels normal to me now because the same amount of external fear is here now, but I've done enough treatment where my internal fear is low. So, I don't know, do you have a thought on how now contamination's gone mainstream, the fears of it?
Yeah, it's interesting because, at first, like COVID didn't really bother me too much because, like you said, I had my own contamination fears, and which for the most part, like with OCD, like when it comes down to it, they're kind of irrational. But COVID was something which at first was rational, like in the sense that we should worry about it, in the sense that we should pay attention. And for some reason, that's why I didn't worry about it. Well, I worried about it, but probably no more than the average person would. But then the average people probably went too far with it, which is what we do with our OCD stuff, with the other things that we worry about, which we shouldn't. So yeah, so I've kind of with COVID, I take general precautions, like, you know, but I don't go overboard with it, but I probably go overboard with other stuff.
So we share something in common, that it's to the point where I'm happy we know each other, because I used to think I'm the only one more afraid of the hand sanitizer than the virus.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I know you now, and this will tie into the third story, but yeah. So anyone out there who's like, you know, I'm more afraid of the disinfectant than the virus, like, we're here too.
Oh yeah, no, that's so chemicals are my big thing, actually. That's my main kind of trigger. It's kind of, you know, household cleaning products, like paint, anything, like, in a way, like for a while there, like I mean, this was a couple of years ago where I was really bad, like, because you can kind of find a chemical in everything, right? So I was kind of afraid to touch anything. But yeah, when COVID came out and then they started spraying all like the grocery carts down and stuff, you know, I'm like, don't spray that, you know, that cart. I'll take the virus instead, like, you know. And I'm still like, I went into Walmart the other day and there were no carts, and they brought in a whole lot of carts from outside, and there were people lined up to get them, and the guy goes and grabs the bottle and he just like sprays everywhere, all over the carts. And I went, well, that's it, I won't be getting a cart today.
You're just like, you just like carried everything?
Yeah, I only had to get a few things, so I just carried them.
That's fun. Well, it's for people, we're a part of a small group, you know, like we had contamination fears before COVID, you know, so when it comes to things like viruses and stuff like that, we've had to, I mean, I've had contamination fears for like decades. So it's like, oh, you mean, you know, like a viral contaminant? Like I'm used to that. I'm on to the next.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it means we can only really talk to each other about this, because people's fear levels are so high that if you come in with, like, I refuse hand sanitizer when I can.
Totally.
But I can't always, you know, for work. Because I work in public school in rural Spain, like there's protocol where I have to use it, and I'm like grimacing. So it's like forced exposure to everything, because you've got, you know, kids who are gonna run around and, you know, like hug and like, you know, touch everything, and then you're supposed to try and make them hand sanitizer, then you're supposed to, and it's your whole shopping story ties into the first story, though. It's the story of the pink towels that got away, and it starts with going to Bed Bath and Beyond or something like that.
Yeah, I had to get some new towels, which, because I often throw out towels.
Well, hang on. Why do you throw out towels?
Because they get contaminated with either, I don't know, something, like either some chemical got on them or something got on them, like too much soap, whatever. And when my anxiety is really bad, I just can't tolerate like drying myself with that towel, because I feel like I'm putting like the chemical all over my body. So I had to go buy some new towels, and they had to be pink towels because I have 3 daughters, and so they insist upon pink towels. Anyway, so I went to the store, got some towels. I was holding the towels. I was going up to the cash, and I saw the person in front of me, like 2 people in front, like the person at the cash was spraying down the counter with disinfectant. And I was like, I am not putting my towels on that counter, right? Because it's just going to get chemicals on them, and then I'm gonna, that's gonna spike my anxiety. So when it was my turn, of course, like the person sprays it down or whatever, and I said, I was carrying the towels, and I said, can you just scan them while I hold them? Because I don't want to put them, like, and he goes, oh yeah, fine, whatever. And then somehow something happened where I was like holding the towels to try and, get the guy to scan them. And I had a couple other things and I was trying to avoid the counter. And of course, like one dropped on the counter. And I mean, I
At
can't remember.
at that moment, were you just like, it's ruined, it's contaminated?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like totally. Like as soon as that happened, like I was like acting normal, like, but inside my head I was like, okay, that's done. Like these towels are done. Like, and so the guy goes like, oh sorry, and I was like, oh yeah, it's fine, don't worry about it, and eventually paid for the towels. And I bought a lot of towels. It was like 6 towels, like, and some other stuff or whatever. I had this bag, it was like $80 worth of stuff. And I walk out into the parking lot and I'm standing there and my anxiety is going through the roof. Like I can't use these towels. I just walked through, I was like in a bit of a daze walking around, and then I just said, you know what? I just put them down in the parking lot and I went home and I just left them there.
Like the bag of all of the towels and everything else?
Everything. I just left the whole thing.
I'm often in that scenario where I either contaminate myself or I lose money. And I usually, so it's like an exposure of either way, of contamination or like loss. And I almost always choose loss because I'm like, for me, it's more like food contamination. Like, is the vegetable like contaminated? Like, is it moldy? Is it old? Or the meat or whatever? So in that moment, anyway, I remember the funniest part of the story originally was that you didn't tell us till like a week later that they were like $80 of pink towels. Like and then on top of it, like your girls, like, do they have a normal response when they see there's no towels?
Yeah. Well, they kind of like, oh, geez, Dad's throwing out the towels again. Like, and so they're like, oh, there's no towels. Like, Daddy, like, stop throwing out the towels. Like,
It's super funny because like the last thing like you want is like an audience or like feedback on the behavior. So if you have like 3 daughters that are like, did you throw out the pink towels again? Like we need to shower. And you're like, they were contaminated. And they're like, oh.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and that's, living from their perspective, like in terms, and it took a long time, like to get to this point where they're quite aware of my OCD. Like for several years, obviously they were not, and I hid it. And I've only in the last couple of years kind of come out with it and being open about it and talk to them about how they can help me, what their best response should be, and that kind of thing, which makes it actually a lot easier. Than trying to pretend.
Guilt and shame and hiding like are terrible for this. And but it means you do have to go up a level to get to that place where you're like, look, I accept this, I own this, I'm going to be vulnerable here and imperfect, but I have I've got kind of like OCD and triggers about this and that, and I need you to do this and that. And once you're there, and now is a great time to say come out, as Margot says, with OCD, because most people have OCD symptoms now. I know people with that who are not diagnosed with OCD that take paper towel, that turn on taps. Everyone's wearing where I'm in Spain, everyone's wearing a mask and using hand sanitizer and worried about contamination. So it's a great time to actually say, like, I have OCD, because we're forcibly being accommodated, like everyone. So it is a great time to come out. And I like teaching through stories because you do have to it's impossible to not be exposed right now. And then it's response prevention, because it's then sitting with the terrible feelings and then just accepting, well, I might be contaminated. And what do I choose next? But your story, like coronavirus isn't always fun. The other story I promised we would talk about is the contaminating cat and the towel that were cleaned. Do you remember the story?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember. It's funny, and this is how OCD is so fascinating, because at the time you're so anxious and you think you're never going to forget, and this thought is going to bother you forever, and that's, you know, and that's why it, you know, feels so horrible. And but I do remember, I don't remember the details, but I do remember there was again, it's a towel. And I often towel, like I said, towels is because, you know, they're so personal, like, you know, because you have to rub them all over your body. So that's why it's just like, oh, it's just, you know, really spikes me. So the cat, at first with the cat, I was worried about, I didn't really want to get a cat, but I got it for my daughter. And the reason I didn't want the cat was because I was worried about the cat going in its kitty litter and then walking all over the house and, you know, like spreading germs that way. So either the cat had been just a kitty litter thing, or the cat had, I don't know, touched something which I thought was contaminated with something else.
It might have been gasoline, like, or something, like, might have gone through like a chemical and then walked on the towel or something like that.
Yeah. So the cat was contaminated, like, and then the cat walked on the towel. And it was like, oh God. Like, and I think because what had happened was I had put, you know, I probably didn't have to do anything about the towel, but I put the towel on the floor, which I normally wouldn't have done if I didn't have OCD, right? And so then the cat walks on the towel. So then I'm like, I created this situation, which is worse.
How did you know? Were you like looking at the towel and the cat walked across it like it's your worst nightmare?
Yeah, exactly.
And then here's where avoidance comes in, right?
Oh yeah, like totally. And so, and then I'm just like, oh, you know, what do I do now? You know what I mean? And then it's just like, this occupies it becomes priority number one, like for your day. Like, you know.
Yeah. Enter rumination.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, well, do I throw out the towel? Do I not throw out the towel? Was the cat really contaminated? Was it not? And then and this is your thought process. And you're supposed to also do everything else you're supposed to do that day, but have this playing in your head, and your body's like, I feel like I'm buzzing a bit with anxiety. And then you think that until I solve this problem, this is never going to go away. So I'm always going to feel like this. And then you just spiral into this horrible anxiety. Like, that just, yeah.
I seem to remember you avoided it, and then I think someone like washed it, and then you used it, or like, because you avoided it, someone took action, and you were like, no, it's worse.
Yes,
do you remember?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that could have been right. Like, I can't mean exactly, but again, it's often these where I kind of just avoid it. Like, I left it again because I didn't want to touch it, and then someone else does it because someone else picked up the towels and washed all the towels and mixed them with all the other ones. And then I'm like, oh my God, now you've this one towel, which if I had kept it, I would have washed it separately. But it, you know, I couldn't. Someone else took it, and now it's worse. Right? And then yeah, I've had many situations like that where you leave something and then something else happens, which is worse. Like, oh yeah, that happens all the time.
I mean, I struggle with avoidance, you know, as well, and then it usually leads to it getting way worse. Which is another kind of exposure.
It's just another exposure. I remember my therapist telling me that, because I was telling him, but I created this situation. So, you know, what do you think about that? Like, you know, isn't that like a real concern? He said, no, I think it's just another exposure.
It's funny because you never would have known had you not happened to see the cat walking across.
That's right. Yeah.
Margaret,
I have another story just with the cat that happened. I don't know if you heard this one, but I'll just keep it brief. But I was worried about, what was it? Yeah, no, I had later this trigger I've had about blood. It's giving me anxiety. And anyway, I was taking the garbage out, and I was worried about, I can't remember exactly, but I was worried about blood being on my hands. So when I opened the door to go outside, I used my wrist, right? And so when I came back in, because I felt there was blood on my fingers, like, I didn't want to open the door from the outside. So I asked my daughter to let me in. And so she comes to let me in, and I said, oh, hang on. When I touched the indoor door handle with my wrist, maybe it was my hand, and maybe some blood did get on the handle on the inside. So I said to my daughter, don't touch the handle, open it with your elbow, right? And she's wearing this sweater, and she said, she's a little bit OCD a bit too, so she says, oh no, then I'll dirty my sweater. I don't want to dirty my sweater. So I'm like, oh, come on, like just, and then so I'm standing outside. It's, -10. It's cold. She won't let me in. And you know what she does? Like, I couldn't believe this. So she didn't want to touch it with her sweater or her hand. So she picks up, the cat was right there, and she gets the paw of the cat and she pushes the door open with the cat's paw, right? And I thought, are you crazy? Now the blood's on the cat's paw and it's going to go all over the house. I said, like, and what are the odds of her picking up the cat and doing that? Oh my God, that was just horrible.
That sounds like the funniest fight of all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't think you could one up those other stories. That's very funny.
Yeah, it's this damn cat. The cat, like, someone in our support group the other day was asking for, or was describing a situation where they had contamination and worried about touching things. And I said, the way to do exposure, I said, is go buy a cat, because the cat will go and touch everything. The cat will go everywhere, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I remember you were seriously considering like decontaminating the cat, like giving it a good walk.
Oh, yeah.
And I was laughing at you being like, the cat's not going to go along with this. Like you will be scratched. It will disobey. Like it doesn't care about your OCD. It cares more about not being bathed.
Yeah.
So,
I haven't bathed the cat yet.
So anyone who's listened this far will now realize why we're so beyond being afraid of the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Like we've got so much more to worry about, like, and have been for so long.
Yeah, I haven't got time for coronavirus. Like, it's like
For people who don't have as much treatment or as much exposure to a good support group, though, like I know there are people that aren't leaving the apartment, aren't going to certain rooms in their apartment. It's a big deal if they go for a walk, then they have to wash and decontaminate for hours, or they're afraid to go because they've got like a shared laundromat and stuff like that. I think it's helpful because the first time I really reached out to people with contamination fears, and I heard like people take 2 hours to do laundry. People. There's one person who can only wear one thing once and has to buy new clothes like on the daily. And I think it's just for us, we can't really avoid exposure. It's really just doing as much response prevention as we can. It kind of leads us to, because this is pre-COVID. When we first met, it was pre-COVID. It was one of the last in-person meetings before they all got canceled. You were worried about going on an airplane trip because of the disinfectant. You were like, if I go on this airplane trip, I know they're going to disinfect the plane, and that's going to bother me because the disinfectants are going to contaminate me.
Yes.
And then later on, you ended up worrying and ruminating and washing your hands for no reason because they got canceled because of COVID.
Yeah.
Do you want to walk us through how useless and how much anxiety and compulsions you went through for basically no reason?
Oh yeah, because I remember that. That was just when we just met back in February or something, and early March, and I was planning to go out to Vancouver, and it was at the time when travel was still okay and everything, because it was just very early days of coronavirus, and so at the time, I had pretty bad OCD about chemicals, and so they were talking about like, oh, don't worry, Air Canada was putting out like ads saying, don't worry, we're going to thoroughly disinfect the plane and wipe everything down. And I was like, oh my God, like this is horrible. Like, I imagine like sitting in the seat and sitting on it, like, disinfectant, and then the tray would have had disinfectant and everything. And I just felt like, I would have been contaminated. And I said, I can't go. Like, I was like, and
you were like worried about being contaminated by decontamination.
Yeah.
They were like, they might as well have said, worry, we are going to put chemicals on everything.
Yeah,
because that's what you heard basically. And everyone else is like, okay, we won't worry because they're going to decontaminate.
Yeah, everyone else is like, phew, okay, we're going to kill the virus, like it's fine. And I'm like, no, like I'll trust my immune system on the virus, just don't, because the chemicals are going to give me cancer 30 years from now and I won't know it. And so that was my fear. And I was getting myself into a sweat about like this flight was coming up, and I was just constantly thinking about how I was going to handle this and what I was going to do. And I would think about canceling the flight or not canceling the flight, and I would go through all the situations of how it was okay or how it was not okay. And yeah, like this occupied my entire week, like, you know, before, and then the flight, and then the flight got cancelled. They cancelled it because of the, like, it was they went extreme, you know, measures, that kind of thing. And then but for me that was actually a huge relief, like that they cancelled the flight.
It's so funny. Hey,
Yeah.
Kurt, if anyone has questions, throw them in the chat. We'll see if we can answer, because we're going to wrap up soon. It's super funny. I think, you know, I promised earlier on in the video that we can help people who are watching with contamination fears, how to overcome their fear of the coronavirus. And I would say what's on our side is that in order to live, you have to be exposed or feel like you're exposed. So I don't know anyone who actually stays home 100% of the time. I know someone who for a while just didn't go out, or if they did, it was you know, very, like, a small amount, like, you know, just for a walk around the block. But treat every time you go do anything as an exposure, and then when the response comes in, like, could be showering, washing clothes, washing hands, whatever it is excessively, just, you know, keep that to a minimum, and be very aware of it. And if you have no choice, because every day is a forced exposure, you are forced to do ERP so long as you consciously do it, to the point where you'll end up like us, worrying about things that are beyond. Like, we don't worry about it. Would you agree? Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, like, I mean, there's two things which have worked for me, like, and basically this year in March, I started working with a therapist who's like an OCD specialist, and he's helped me hugely. And there's basically two things. Number one is, really doing that response prevention, exposing yourself, seeing anxiety as almost as a good thing, in that if you have anxiety, it means that you haven't done a compulsion to take it away, which is a good thing, right? Because you want your brain to adapt and to get used to this, that this is okay, that this situation which you're convinced yourself like that this is going to, you know, cause some disaster, that's actually not going to happen. So you have to just sit with it. You just got to sit with the anxiety and tell yourself, like, yep, this is a good thing, and then just keep doing whatever it is like that you had to do next. My therapist also uses humor a lot. So I like for example, with coronavirus, or even it could be any virus, like, or germs or whatever, because you worry about, well, this touches this and then this is now contaminated. So like with contamination fears, he said to me, because I was talking to him once about, you know, I'm worried about, well, I'll have to go and inspect this, and then, you know, look at this, and did this touch this and that. And he says, okay, I'll let you do that. He said, you can do two things. You can either just walk away, like, you know, just expose yourself to the fact that, yes, there could be some contaminant there, and feel the anxiety. So I'll let you go and you know, think about it though, but under this condition, because I want you to go, and he says, do you have, like, you know, those old hats from the 40s, you know, whatever, like the old detectives used to wear? And I want you to get a pen and pad of paper, and I want you to, like, put a tie on, and I want you to say, like, that you're a detective, right? And that you get a magnifying glass, because I want you to physically go and get these things. And then when the next time you have the thought that this touch this, he goes, go get your magnifying glass, put your hat on, put your tie on, and get your pen and paper. I want you to take notes, right? And you have to, you know, be a detective to figure it out. And I said, that's absurd. He said, totally, exactly. Like, he said, that's absurd, right? He said, so either go do the absurd stuff, or walk away and then just sit with it. And it made me laugh. I thought that was hilarious. Like, so it's like, oh, so now that became, whenever I thought, like, oh, I'm going to go check if this, I just say to myself, detective, and then just walk off. Like, so.
That reminds me about props. I think props are good, because props can then also get contaminated. But a magnifying glass would be a great prop. because
Yeah.
when we keep ruminating, you know, it's because we're a detective that has amnesia with anxiety. You know, and so if we had a magnifying glass every time we started ruminating, we'd be like, "Oh, this is absurd." In fact, this hurts to keep doing it. You know, like if you keep washing your hands, they will start to bleed. And I actually have two props. And one of my props is this: it's a big yes/no coin, and indecision is massive with OCD, and it's avoidance. And I always look at it and I'm like, you know, make the decision. You know, yes or no. You know, and I've got another one here. It's like a wedding band. It's kind of a keep my priorities in check, because if I keep just wasting time, you know, a lot of my big life goals, you know, it's nice that we're live streaming now. You know, this is somewhat of a dream because we've helped so many people locally. It makes an awful lot of sense. It's instead of saying other people from other parts of the world can't be a part of our support group, you know, beam out some of our help. So, you know, it's great that we stopped their compulsions long enough to be able to put this out. Do you have any famous last words before I wrap? This was fun, and if you want to come back, we can do it again.
I'll definitely come back. I guess like the last thing I'll say is just the last thing I've recently been working on, just come across, is this concept of like how to deal with rumination, and like the people like. Rumination used to, you know, is seen as like an obsession, like, oh, you obsess about something. So you're thinking and thinking and going through all the scenarios of how this could either turn out bad or whatever. And whatever your trig happens to be. But recently I've come across this idea, it's through a psychologist I heard on a podcast called The OCD Stories, which is really, really great if people want to check that out. It's called The OCD Stories. Find it on wherever you find podcasts. And it's that rumination is a compulsion. And actually, I mean, and I have to credit Margot here, like as another member of our support group, because she shared the episode. And anyway, the idea is that all this thinking is a compulsion, not an obsession. So like the initial thought you might have, like, oh my God, I've got coronavirus because I touched this doorknob, right? Like, okay, and then you think about that for the rest of the day. Well, the initial thought is the obsession that, okay, you're worried about having coronavirus, but the thinking that you do all day about it is a compulsion to make that go away, right? Which is just like washing your hands. Like, it's just like doing any other compulsion you have to make yourself feel better, which is not going to work, right? And so instead of just keeping on thinking, like to try and solve the problem, this psychologist said, no, think about your core fear is that something bad's going to happen, right? Either I'm going to die or someone else is going to die or whatever, this irrational kind of thought. And then say, like, what do I have to do about that thought? And the answer is nothing, because the thought is irrational. And so all this analytical thinking you're doing, this rumination to solve this problem, is a total waste of time.
Or it's worse, it ramps your anxiety up, and then you end up with these anxiety attacks in public.
Well, yeah, exactly. So whenever I catch myself trying to figure something out, then I think, no, this is just like going to wash your hands. So the exposure is to just say, like, okay, I'm just going to go do something else instead. Like, you know, I'm just going to, because what do I do about this thought? Oh, nothing. The thought just exists, but it just exists like, you know, like this pen exists. It just exists. It's neutral. So everyone has thoughts, but I'm paying attention to it. I'm making it something bigger than it needs to be. So don't do that.
I think what shocked me in Grayson's book is, so, you know, OCD is more widespread now. People who were maybe like had less, you know, compulsions to the point where they wouldn't have been considered to have it, now possibly have it. And what made me somewhat shocked is that across the whole population, people get intrusive thoughts. It's just we feel them so much stronger. And then we react strongly with these compulsions, and then with the obsessions like the fear, and the compulsions are the things we do to try and reassure ourselves. And then, you know, reassurance is like the, you know, pick your drug that kills you over time. Like it might be, it might feel great to be like, I don't, my hands are clean. I won't hurt I won't be contaminated. I won't contaminate other people. And, it's hard because you have to accept, I don't know.
No, you don't. And maybe you missed the spot.
And maybe, maybe the worst, whatever your core, if you can break down to the core terror is, like that might happen. And the worst is avoidance, where it gets worse. Like, that's why I like your stories today, because like you avoided it.
Yeah.
And it got way worse. It's kind of like running, avoiding a dragon. It's like, you think it's not going to find you.
Yeah.
It's like, I mentioned this kind of, blessings can be burdens. People who had soft, easy lives before 2020, they might have been slammed by, all the economic disruption, the contamination fears. But people who, like us, who had strong contamination fears beforehand, like, not that much has changed. My fear, our fears, I'm like, I've driven on this highway for decades now.
Yeah.
Other people are like, I don't know how to drive on a highway. And I'm like, I meet me in 20 years when you're worried about the decontamination.
That's right.
I'm sure we can name toxins in soap. It's like,
soap used to get, it was so funny because for a while there, like, I was worried about germs, and so I would wash my hands like all the time, and then suddenly, I don't know, things flipped and I became worried about the soap. And then I was like, oh my God, I have been flooding myself with these soap toxins and washing my hands too much. And then I got caught in the middle, and I didn't know. Sometimes, like with your coins, like, do I wash or do I not wash? Because do I want to use the soap or not use the soap? Is it the germs or the soap? Which one do I take? Like,
The best part is it's kind of both,
Yeah.
And then you end up just more scared because you're like, what else? Like, what else am I missing? And then you find out something. Like, I actually bring my own soap to school because the soap at school has sodium lauryl sulfate in it. Of course, what it is. So does most soap. I'm obviously preaching to the choir, but I'm like bringing my own bar soap, and in that bar soap, there's like food coloring and like perfume, and I'm like, there's no perfect way out. I live and die by faith alone at this point.
That's so true. Like, I get into those situations, like, it's like whether I wash the cat or don't wash the cat, or somehow there's a bad outcome either way. And I'm just, do you ever find that you get stuck staring at something? Like, I'm just staring at the tap, like, do I clean the tap or not clean the tap? If I clean the tap, then this will happen. The person touches it next time, then, all right, but then if I don't clean the tap, then, then that could happen. And then I'm just staring for 5 minutes at the tap. It's just absurd.
Staring at the tap makes me late for work. Staring at the stove after I'm done staring at the tap, and I'm like, good Lord, like, I'm not in a position where I can be late for work. Because
at some point you have to just, like you say, you live or die by faith alone. So
and it's funny because it's a thing, like, being in the support group for so long, like, compulsions make you late. Making you late makes you fired. Making you fired makes you, like, at home with your, like, compulsions. And anyway, it's a really funny spiral that I think only, like, our little tribe of people with OCD really get. Totally. And it's a weird time to be alive with OCD now, because I remember walking through, a shopping mall in Ottawa, and there was, like, on the loudspeakers, it was like, keep 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
There is a good chance you will be contaminated. And I was like, where were you when I needed you? It's like,
why didn't you tell me that 10 years ago?
And so I think some people with contamination fears, maybe it got worse. But then for people like us with a lot of treatment, we're like, where that internal voice was almost too much before, now the external voice has risen up, and it's I think seeing that it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't
Totally.
You have to just go forward regardless. Like you've got X amount of time. Yeah, I think if people are struggling, like they can set a timer. Just be like, look, like I know I'm struggling with this, like, because everyone relapses a little. I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm not cure like like I mean I'm a lot better, but like I have bad days or bad like where I lose 2-3 hours or whatever, and because sometimes it's hard, like you're feeling so anxious and you just want to ruminate and figure it out, and it's so hard to ignore that, and so you just kind of sit in a corner or your desk, and I put my head down, and before I know it, half an hour's gone by. Whereas the answer though is not try to, like, if you wait until you feel better before you go do something else, like it's just not going to happen, because you're always going to think of another what if scenario. So that's about where that exposure, that doing stuff with anxiety, accepting anxiety is just an emotion, just like any other emotion, and it's okay to be anxious, and you can do things while anxious anyway, and then move forward. That's the best thing to do, and just go forward with the anxiety anyway. Like that's what you have to do. It's really hard, but you got to do it.
It's a really important point, because a lot of us, like, we're really hard on ourselves when we, like, we start to do really well, and then something happens in it, and then we start to okay, let's take this example. Someone asked, how did you guys overcome washing the tap and excessive hand washing? So this is a perfect example where so we'll answer it, but like if you do lower the amount of response, like let's say washing either your hands or the tap, if a big life event happens and then that goes through the roof again, like you shouldn't get mad at yourself. That makes it even worse.
Yeah.
I would say for me is I became really aware of when I was doing it, and then I just accepted that this is a cross that I carry, that we carry, that is difficult. And I do my best every day, and I don't need to go out of my way for exposure. Just realizing it's uncertain, and then I know that I need to leave feeling anxious, and even if I stay an hour or whatever it is, I don't have that certainty switch for some things, and I have to just accept it and get out of there. Doing another thing, if you have the strength, is a big deal. But like if you're tired, like you're just gonna have some bad experiences. you can't really avoid the war against uncertainty if you're one of us. But it is consciously trying to do it. My goal is I check everything once and I'm out. Yeah. It's not often always done, but that's the ideal. And then every time just trying to just check once, like, the stove is off, I'm out. Can you speak to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like you have to becoming okay with that uncertainty. Like, so with, with the tap, you just don't wash it, and you say to yourself, instead of saying everything's going to be all right, you have to say, no, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know. And that's the big deal with OCD, is like you have to become comfortable with, or more comfortable with, uncertainty. So staring at the tap, wanting to wash it, and saying, I'm going to leave the bathroom and the tap could be contaminated and I just won't know, and I'm going to feel anxious, but I'm going to go and do what I was going to do next anyway. And eventually that anxiety will pass. It will, because anxiety comes and goes like any other emotion. And, sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're calm, sometimes you're anxious. Like, so you have to treat it like just another emotion. It's a physical response you're having to some thought in your head, because you're not comfortable with uncertainty. You need to know for sure that that tap is clean and that you're not going to cause harm by not cleaning it. But it's impossible to know that. You have to accept the uncertainty and then just walk away. So that's how I've made a lot of progress with my OCD. And I think it's at the core of all the different themes of OCD, whether it's contamination or not, is being comfortable with uncertainty. And it sucks in the short term, but it works in the long term. Yeah.
Well, it's actually great in the long term. Okay, yeah. So totally. to finish, like the metaphor of like blessings can turn into burdens. Like someone with a very easy life pre-2020 might have a very rough awakening in 2020 if, let's say, all of a sudden now they're racked with contamination fears they've never had, or they lose the job, or whatever, where we're always fighting for our lives with contamination, showing up on time, checking our work, and like being worried about what other people think, and like submitting, or just like worry, like that type of stuff, which like, it's almost like welcome to our world. But this burden becomes a blessing, because as much as I still struggle with anxiety, I've come far enough where I take crazy uncertain risks now that most people wouldn't do, because I'm so used to like unbelievable anxiety that I'm like, why not move to rural Spain during the global quarantine?
Yeah, you did that. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I am right now. They're playing Spanish Christmas music over there. And switching from law to teaching because the courts were closed, and I was like, there's it's uncertain. Like, and I, be like having OCD is like, you don't exactly want to be suing Canada's biggest companies all the time if you don't like it, because then you're always rechecking like, court filings, and then it's like, well, what's this big company gonna come back with, and then the what if, and you're like, what if I forgot a rule, and then there's like the all the court rules. It's like, I'm what if I miss one? Am I a bad lawyer then? Like it all comes down to, am I bad? Am I gonna hurt someone?
And that's why I like sometimes this new thought of thinking about the core fear rather than the specific trigger. So if it's blood or paint or coronavirus or whatever, but the core fear is not really about that. It's about that I'm irresponsible, I'm a bad person, I'm going to cause harm, and that thought itself is not rational, because well, at least for me, like, I mean, I know I'm a good person, and I'm not intentionally going out to try and hurt anyone. So now what I try to do, one of my latest techniques to deal with it is, when I have the trigger about like the contamination, like going back to the tap or whatever, is thinking like, oh, this is about that thought about me being a bad person. What do I do about that thought? Nothing. Because that thought is meaningless. Like, that thought is not worth, like, it's just...
Someone came into the support group around the time you joined and said, if you think about thoughts like, if you think of your mind as like a river flowing, and you think of your thoughts going through the river almost like fish, what we do is we take scary fish and we grab them and we hold them, and then we like let them electrocute us, and we're like, what if I'm bad? What if I hurt them? What if this impulse is true, and what does that mean? And does that mean I'm a this or that? And then like, if you just like normal people are like, that's a scary fish. Like,
exactly.
And then look at us and we're like, why aren't you grabbing it and electrocuting yourself? And they're like, and we're like, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Like, because we're just like, where's the danger? Let me
danger, exactly. Yeah, where is it?
Let me do like a PhD amount of research on this while having all my other problems and worrying about.
That's right. We're still doing everything else. Like, this is on top of like, going to work, taking care of kids, making dinner, like all these things. And, so it's amazing. Like, yeah.
There's a really good question here from the OCD memes. It's, what if I like my intrusive thought? And I think that's a way of your brain's kind of almost tricking yourself to keep holding the fish. Because like, that's how a theme sticks with you for months and maybe years. I know someone who's probably still obsessed about asbestos. Sorry. And he's like 10 years ago, something happened with asbestos, and he's worried he was something he did would have hurt someone else, and yada yada. And it's like, that is, I think, a positive addiction. Like, I'm not saying like, he's bad or anything. I think we all do this. And I've had themes that seem to come back, and it's like, there's a perverse amount of enjoyment you almost have to get, like, to keep holding on. And it's a weird amount of sadism. I think you have to be really conscious of the thought, really realize, oh, I'm addicted to like the terror response. Like, I don't like it. I'm just used to it. Yeah. It's just a habit. It's like, I don't like my compulsions. I'm used to the drug hit of reassurance. And I don't like feeling terror, but I like feeling alive. Would you agree or disagree? I don't know, because I just went on a rant.
No, that's fine. Like, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it. I agree with the idea of probably getting used to like seeing reassurance, or liking the feel, like, you know, the feeling of going through that process, because it gives us relief, right? So it's like like you said, like that kind of drug addiction kind of thing.
Well, it's a
That
roller
makes sense.
coaster. Yeah, OCD is right. Like it's a thrill. Like you get to feel terrified. It's like living in a horror movie. You know,
Yeah.
like you get to feel the highs and lows of it.
Like,
And
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like that, because like the other day, like a few nights ago, I was sitting there watching TV, and like everything kind of felt good, and because often I think like, what would it be like not to have OCD? Like what, like my default is just constantly scanning. I'm scanning the environment. I'm analyzing. You know, that's how my brain works. And so sometimes
That's how
I
you
think,
caught the cat.
yeah. So, um, and I was just sitting there, and it was like my brain was quiet, you know, and it was like weird. And I thought, oh, this is nice though. It's kind of quiet and everything, but it's weird. And so sometimes I kind of wonder, like, because it's all mixed up in your head, like, is because I like analyzing stuff. Like, I don't like the anxiety side of things, but I think it's almost like it's just part of who I am. Like, I don't know, like I want to get it to the point where obviously I'm not wasting time on stuff I shouldn't be worrying about, but I still would like to worry about and analyze things that I find interesting, you know, like, so, you know.
Yeah, there's like there is a healthy road in here.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think so. I made kind of like a minor promise at the beginning of this stream, and it's like, if you do your exposures to coronavirus situations and you do response prevention, like you figure out what your line is, and if it's wash your hands for 20 seconds, 30, whatever is reasonable. If you don't go beyond that, and then you freak out, and then you just get used to that. You train your body to, I did the reasonable thing, you know? And then on the other hand, like I like researching as well. I like studying history and politics and stuff like that. But if I'm powered by anxiety, then it's probably, and I'm up till 1 a.m. or something, as an example, that is more likely a compulsion than a healthy hobby. And so the other big promise, like we named this Free from OCD because, you know, I did this, you know, maybe I'm over it now, but I was diagnosed as severe. And then the second time I did the test, I was diagnosed within the general population. Okay. So you can be free from OCD, meaning you're in the bracket of the general population, because everyone in the general population once in a while thinks, did I turn the stove off?
Oh yeah, totally. Everyone has these thoughts. Yeah, exactly. And like I was like you, like, you know, like 2 years ago, I was actually in a mental health facility for 2 weeks for OCD. Ooh. And so I've come a long way. And you can, for those out there who are struggling, like you can get better for sure. You can get it to a manageable state, and I'm hoping to get it even better than it is. And I know I will. I'm working at it, and I'm doing. But it's work. It's hard work. It's not. There's no magic pill or anything. Like, you know, even if you're on medication, like, you know, I'm on medication, but that's not going to solve all your problems. Like from an OCD point of view, you have to go through the hard work of doing the exposure, feeling the anxiety, and habituating yourself to that anxiety. Like that's the only way, at least that I know of so far. And but it pays off, because I've been doing it a lot since March this year. I've really been doing it a lot more, and yeah, I still have bad days and bad weeks, and it's been a tough week actually this week, but compared to March, I'm way better than I was. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it is totally, you know, by us. Like I had a moment walking home. I have to walk over this pedestrian bridge over a highway, like just filled with anxiety. And I was like, you know, because I wanted to make sure that we had a good stream, and I needed to buy groceries, and I had to do laundry. And I was like, I just filled with anxiety. And I was like, I know why people take meds, you know, because like this is no fun. And if you don't, like, knowledge is a massive amount of power. Like if you've read Grayson's book, if you have a good support group, if you've learned from either, like, I mean, it's expensive. Like the amount of treatment that me and Margot have gotten is not free, and it's high level, and it's almost like occult knowledge. Like it's not, most doctors have no idea, you know, and
they don't.
Like I get why it's hard, because I freaking have mini panic attacks all over rural Spain. You know, like if it rains too hard, we lose power. Yeah. Like it's ridiculous. Okay, well, why don't we wrap there for today?
Sounds good.
And I just want to say to anyone watching this, obviously Matt and I overcome these fears. You can too. You can still achieve your goals. Like I wanted to go teach in rural Spain, and I did it during the kind of contamination apocalypse. And burdens can be blessings, but you run from this dragon. It's way worse to be eaten by it than to duel it, and you kind of have to duel it. Like as much as I've been free from OCD for a while, it's something you battle. We're just susceptible to uncertainty. Like it's not something fun. I'm not on meds, and I am in Spain freaking out, so it is possible, kind of to live your dreams and keep up the positive habits. You need a lot of positive habits, and then. If you're not already, please follow us on Instagram and YouTube. We're going to start putting out more content. And on Facebook, we have a page and a group called Free From OCD, and we will likely be back live soon. So thanks a lot, Matt. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. But 2 words, whenever I'm struggling the most, there's 2 words I say to myself: hope and recovery. They always make me feel a little bit better. So hope and recovery to everyone out there.
Good luck, everyone. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye.